Welcome back to Investing Talk podcast. Today we're looking closely at Uniqure NV, that's ticker QURE. We've gathered updates right up to April 17th, 2025. For our listeners wanting the key takeaways, we're going to unpack the recent developments around this gene therapy company. Our aim here is to pull out the crucial insights, understand, what caused that big market reaction, and maybe gauge what it means going forward, all without getting too bogged down in the technical stuff.
That's the plan. We've got a range of info from the latest FDA news and the market's immediate response to a wider look at their financials, the competitive scene, and, well, what the future might hold.
Okay, let's get started then. The really big news, as of April 17th, 2025, the FDA granted breakthrough therapy designation to Unique's AMT-130 for Huntington's disease. Now, that sounds important. What exactly does that designation mean?
It's definitely a big step. Breakthrough therapy designation is reserved for treatments targeting serious conditions where the clinical evidence, well, it suggests a substantial improvement over therapies that are already available.
And for Huntington's, there isn't much available, right?
Exactly. There are no disease-modifying treatments currently. So getting this designation really highlights the potential the FDA sees in AMT-130 based on what they've seen so far.
So beyond just maybe faster approval, does this signal something about the FDA's confidence? And how might investors see that?
It certainly suggests a higher degree of confidence from the regulator, yes, based on that preliminary data. And for investors, well, that kind of validation from the FDA can be a very positive signal,
I think I read AMT-130 already had some other statuses.
That's right. It had already picked up regenerative medicine advanced therapy or RMAT orphan drug and fast-track status.
So how does breakthrough build on those?
It adds another level, really. It means more intensive guidance from the FDA during development, and it opens the door to things like priority review, potentially shaving time off the path to market, assuming, of course, the later trials hold up.
Okay, and this was based on interim data from phase 3 trials. What was it about that data that was so compelling?
Well, the key finding seems to be from the 24-month data points. It showed a dose-dependent slowing of disease progression. They measure this using something called the CUHDRS score.
Dose-dependent meaning higher dose, better effect.
Essentially, yes, indicating a biological response related to the treatment level. And critically, this was compared against natural history controls, basically, how patients would typically progress without this intervention.
How many patients are we talking about?
So far, 45 patients have been treated. It's still relatively early stage phase 3, but those indications were strong enough for the FDA designation.
Got it. And what's the next step for Uniqure, regulatorily speaking?
They're expecting more guidance from the FDA soon, specifically about their biologics license application or BLA submission that's anticipated sometime in Q2 2025.
The BLA is the formal application for approval, right?
Correct. That's the big package of data they submit to get the drug approved for sale.
Okay, stepping back a bit, why is this single piece of news such a big deal for Uniqure overall?
Well, a few reasons. Firstly, it significantly boosts the odds, or at least the perceived odds, of AMT-130 reaching patients faster. Secondly, it really underlines their strategic push into these severe neurological diseases. It's a move beyond their work in hemophilia B with Hemgenix.
Right, Hemgenix was their first approved product?
Yes, for hemophilia B, partnered with CSL Behring for commercialization. So this Huntington's program shows diversification into another area of huge unmet need. It positions them quite visibly in the neurodegeneration space.
And the market certainly noticed. The reaction was pretty dramatic. What happened to the stock price?
It was immediate. On April 17th, following the news, the stock jumped nearly 39% in pre-market trading. It hit around $14 a share, up from the $9, $10 range it was in previously.
Wow, nearly 40%. In biotech, do those kinds of jumps usually stick, or what could make it pull back?
That's always the question. Big jumps like that show strong positive sentiment, obviously. But sustainability, it really depends on follow-through. Continued good news from trials, smooth regulatory progress, those help. But any setbacks, trial delay, disappointing data later on, regulatory questions, that could definitely cause a pullback. Market conditions matter too, of course.
What did the analysts make of it? Did their targets change?
The reaction from analysts was generally very positive. The consensus price target moved up, averaging around $36.70 per share now.
$36.70 compared to the $14 it hit.
Right, and some forecasts are even higher, up to $70. So that suggests analysts see quite a bit of potential upside from here, maybe around 177% from those recent levels.
And the ratings, still positive.
Yes, the general brokerage ratings are things like outperform or strong buy.
Okay, so the outlook seems quite bright based on AMT 130, but I did see a note about their recent financials. Didn't they miss expectations recently?
That's true, and it's an important point to balance against the pipeline optimism. Their most recent quarterly results, they actually came in below expectations.
How far below?
Revenue missed by about 31%, and earnings per share, or EPS, missed by around 25%. So not insignificant misses.
How do we square that? The stock jumps on pipeline news, analysts are bullish, but the current numbers are lagging.
It highlights the nature of biotech investing, doesn't it? Investors are often looking years ahead. While the recent quarter disappointed, Unique's management is projecting really strong future revenue growth, something like 51% annually over the next 3 years.
51% annually. Where's that expected to come from?
That projection is likely heavily based on the potential commercial success of their pipeline, especially Hemgenix royalties ramping up and down the line, the possibility of AMT 130 approval and launch. Analysts seem to be buying into that long-term growth story, outweighing the short-term miss.
Let's dig into the financials a bit more then. What did the full year 2024 look like?
For full year 2024, total revenues were $27.1 million. Now, that was up from $15.8 million in 2023, but way down from $106.5 million in 2022.
Why the big drop from 2022?
That big number in 2022 was likely due to significant one-time licensing revenue, probably related to the Hemgenix partnership. The more recent figures reflect ongoing royalties and other collaborations.
Okay. And the bottom line, still losing money.
Oh yes, definitely. The net loss for 2024 was $239.6 million. That's actually an improvement, though, from a loss of $308.5 million in 2023.
So losses are narrowing. And EPS?
Similar trend. EPS was negative $4.92 for 2024, better than the negative $6.47 in 2023. Still significant losses, but moving in the right direction, slowly.
What about their cash situation? R&D like this burns through a lot of money. How long can they keep going?
That's always critical for clinical stage biotechs. As of their latest update, which included some recent financing, they had about $367 million in cash and cash equivalents.
$367 million, and how long does that last them?
They estimate that's enough to fund their operations into the second half of 2027. So, that gives them a decent runway, maybe 3 years or so, to hit key milestones.
That sounds reasonably healthy. But you mentioned R&D burn. How high are their operating expenses?
They are substantial. Operating expenses are running around $215 million annually.
And most of that is R&D.
The lion's share, yes.
Yeah.
About $143 million is tagged for research and development. That's pretty standard for a company pushing multiple candidates through clinical trials. It's the cost of innovation in this sector.
I also saw a mention of their debt-to-equity ratio being complicated, something about negative equity.
Right. Due to the accumulated losses over the years and how they structured financing, they technically have a negative equity position on the balance sheet.
What does that mean in simple terms? High leverage.
Essentially, yes. It signifies significant financial leverage. It means their liabilities are greater than their assets according to standard accounting. For investors, this leverage can, magnify potential returns if things go well, but it also increases risk if things don't pan out. It's something to be aware of.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. Let's pivot back to the science for a moment. Huntington's disease. Remind us why this is such a focus area.
It's just a devastating disease, fundamentally. It's inherited, neurodegenerative, and relentlessly progressive.
Yeah.
And as we said, there are currently no treatments that actually slow or stop the disease progression. Symptoms can be managed to some extent, but the underlying disease continues. So the unmet medical need is enormous.
And gene therapy offers a fundamentally different approach.
That's the hope. Instead of just managing symptoms, gene therapy aims to correct the underlying genetic defect, or at least counteract its effects, potentially with a single treatment. We're seeing progress in gene therapy for various genetic disorders, building on advances in things like viral vectors.
Viral vectors, like the delivery mechanism.
Exactly. Using modified harmless viruses like AAV adeno-associated virus to deliver the therapeutic gene payload into the target cells. The technology's come a long way, allowing focus on more complex conditions like Huntington's, ALS, and others.
So within this gene therapy landscape, how does Uniqure stack up against competitors, especially in neurodegeneration?
It's a busy field overall, but for Huntington specifically using gene therapy, Uniqure is certainly one of the leaders, especially now with a breakthrough designation for AMT 130.
Who are some other major players in gene therapy generally?
Well, you have companies like Spark Therapeutics, which is now part of Roche, known for their work in eye diseases and hemophilia. Bluebird Bio is another key name, focusing on severe genetic diseases and cancer.
How does Uniqure differentiate itself?
I'd say their strong focus on CNS targets like Huntington's, epilepsy, ALS sets them apart somewhat. While others are also exploring neurology, Uniqure has made it a core pillar alongside hemophilia. It's arguably a less crowded space currently than, say, hemophilia gene therapy was a few years ago.
Yeah.
That focus could be a strategic edge.
We've talked a lot about the opportunity, particularly with AMT 130. But let's be balanced. What are the major risks still facing Uniqure and its investors?
Plenty of risks remain, absolutely. Number one is clinical trial risk. Phase 3 data is promising, but Phase 3 trials are the big, expensive hurdle needed to confirm efficacy and safety definitively. Things can, and often do, go wrong at that stage.
And regulatory risk, even with breakthrough status.
Yes. Breakthrough therapy designation helps. It provides more FDA interaction, but it absolutely does not guarantee approval. The final data package has to be convincing. There can still be delays, requests for more data, manufacturing concerns, lots of potential regulatory hurdles.
What about the financials we discussed?
That's another risk factor. The recent underperformance against expectations needs watching. They need to manage their cash burn effectively, especially if there are any delays in the pipeline. Continued losses put pressure on the company.
Any other risks? Market sentiment?
Sure, the broader macroeconomic environment always plays a role, especially for biotech, which can be sensitive to interest rates and investor risk appetite.
Yeah.
And yes, social sentiment among investors, online discussions show excitement, but also caution. People are waiting for more solid data, and you always have to be wary of unverified rumors about partnerships or things like that.
Good points. Let's broaden the view again to their pipeline. We know HemGenX and AMT 130. What else is in development?
They have several other interesting candidates. AMT 260 is targeting refractory mesial temporal lobe epilepsy.
Yes.
AMT 191 is for Fabry disease, and AMT 162 is aimed at a specific genetic form of ALS linked to the SOD1 gene.
So quite a diverse pipeline across different neurological and genetic conditions.
Yes, it shows a commitment to leveraging their core technology across multiple high-need areas.
And what is that core technology that ties these together? Is it all AAV-based?
Primarily, yes. Their focus is on developing these potentially one-time curative treatments using their proprietary AAV vector platform. They invested heavily in optimizing these vectors for delivery to different tissues, like the brain or liver. They combine this with gene editing or gene replacement strategies, depending on the disease.
And they have advantages beyond just the tech?
They do. Strong intellectual property protection around their vectors and technologies, multiple orphan drug designations, which offer development incentives and market exclusivity, and strategic partnerships, like the crucial one with CSL for HemGenX commercialization.
Looking forward then, what are the key things investors should be watching for? The next big catalysts?
The most immediate potential catalyst is probably news around the BLA submission for AMT 130. Getting that submitted in Q2 or Q3 2025 would be a major milestone.
And beyond that?
Data readouts. We should expect updates from the ongoing Phase 3 studies for AMT 130, but also potentially from their other programs like the epilepsy or Fabry disease candidates throughout the year. Positive data from any of these could be significant.
On the flip side, what are the potential bumps in the road we should be aware of?
The risks we mentioned earlier could certainly materialize. Regulatory delays with the AMT 130 BLA, trial results that might be less positive than hoped, either for AMT 130 or other pipeline assets. Manufacturing can always be complex for gene therapies, so any issues there could cause delays. And of course, increasing competition, other companies advancing their own programs.
Okay, so putting it all together, the exciting pipeline, the financial realities, the risks, what's the general feeling from the analyst community right now?
As we touched on, the consensus view remains quite positive, generally an outperform rating. Analysts seem to be weighing the potential of AMT 130 in the pipeline quite heavily, leading to those high price targets suggesting significant upside.
Based on everything we've gone through today, what's a reasonable takeaway or stance for an investor considering Uniqure?
It's a classic clinical stage biotech story, really. Immense potential balanced by significant risk. Given the recent positive momentum with the breakthrough designation and the upcoming catalysts, maybe something like a hold to buy makes sense.
Meaning?
Well, if you already hold shares, the upcoming news flow might warrant holding on to see how things play out. For new investors, given the stock already jumped significantly, perhaps waiting for a bit more confirmation, maybe positive updates on the BLA process or further data might be prudent before jumping in. It requires a high tolerance for risks, certainly.
So wrapping this up for our listeners, the FDA's breakthrough therapy designation for Uniqure's Huntington's treatment, AMT-130, is clearly a very important development. It's created a lot of optimism, fueled that big stock price jump, and it really underscores the potential of gene therapy in tough diseases.
Absolutely. It highlights Uniqure making real progress. But, like we said, it's biotech, especially clinical stage biotech. There are always risks involved, and keeping an eye on our financial health is crucial. The next few months, with potential regulatory news and more trial data, are going to be really telling for the company.
We hope this discussion has given everyone a good overview of the recent situation with Uniqure. It's definitely a story that's still unfolding.
And we always encourage listeners to do their own homework, look at the official company press releases, check out their SEC filings. This is a fast-moving space.
What are your thoughts out there on gene therapy's future, or on companies like Uniqure? We'd genuinely like to hear from you.
Please do subscribe, like, and drop a comment to let us know what you think. Or tell us about other topics you'd find interesting for us to cover in future discussions.